Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. It's an engaging and enlightening talk show on life, relationships, and the business of life. Grab a cup of juice and just chill. Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. Live life.
Stephen on Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. Now, the show focuses on personal development and self-improvement, occasionally expert and professionals who are adept in these topics. Now, for the audience of Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen, it's for them to be able to take well-informed decisions after listening to expert and professionals share profound insight on these topics so that they can move closer to the life they were truly meant to be. It gives me great pleasure to have Colin Hughes, who is the speaker, and he addresses suicide awareness. Welcome with me on today's show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you, Collins. Now, I'm looking forward to an enlightening and inspiring show today. Going forward, you'll be talking more about suicide and its awareness. And I think it's a topic that we need to be focusing now, especially in these trying times of our lives. Now, according to you, Collins, suicide is one of the most difficult topics to talk about, but one of the most important topics of our time. Now, what led you to this conclusion?
Well, that's kind of a long story. I've in my early days, I rodeoed for a living. I rode bulls, and after my time as a bull rider, I went into announcing rodeos, and I became very aware of the talent I've been gifted with of public speaking. You put me behind a microphone and I am right at home. I mean, most people, they see people out there and a microphone in front of them, they freeze up. Me, I'm like, we're getting ready to have some fun. But I've always wondered why I was given this gift. I knew that I've been saved a few different times throughout my life from certain death. And one good example, when I was a child, my family was on a picnic at Lake Manawa in Council Bluffs, Iowa. And I was maybe 5 or 6 years old at the time, and I got caught up in this whirlpool action of the water that pulled me under, was just twirling me around. And I was trying to kick out and trying to get out, kind of trying to fight, and I couldn't. I was about to lose my breath, and couldn't breathe when somebody reached in, grabbed my arm, and pulled me out. And I went running back to tell my parents what had happened. And my mother says, "Oh, there's nothing like that in Lake Manawa." And she thought I was making it up. So I go next door to the picnic site next door, where I saw the man return to afterwards, but nobody knew him. Nobody knew who I was talking about. Well, another example later in life, I was getting ready to cross the road, and I had an obstructed view of the highway, and somebody yelled my nickname, which is Goose back then when I rode. He says, "Goose, get back!" And I felt the whoosh of a car that came about that close to hitting me. If I would have stepped out on the road, that's another time I would have been killed. So I've always wondered, with this ability of public speaking, why has my life been saved? June 10th of 2022. I got a phone call from my daughter. Her caller ID came up, and so I answered the phone. "Hi, honey, how you doing?" And it was her husband on the phone, and I knew instantly that something was wrong. And he proceeded to tell me that my 15-year-old granddaughter had ended her own life that day. And I instantly just went into yelling and screaming and crying harder than I ever have my entire life, even harder than when I lost my oldest daughter to cancer in 2015. People say that losing a child is the hardest thing you'll go through. But I knew that my daughter, when she had cancer, I knew I was going to lose her, so I had time to prepare for it. With my granddaughter and suicide, she was one of the last people I thought could ever do this. And since I'm a voice actor, my wife is used to me, making loud noises in my sound room and stuff. And finally, when it didn't stop, she came out. And but within the first 30 seconds of all this misery and screaming and yelling and crying I was going through, the thought popped into my head, though, I know now what I've been saved for. And so I'm not an expert on mental health or suicide. I'm not a statistician of anything like that. I knew, a couple of facts, but that's about it. But I do know the pain that goes along with losing a loved one, especially one, that is so close to you. Because my granddaughter and I were very close. My wife and I took her to Hawaii when she was 12 years old. She lived she lived out in Nebraska at the time of her death, and before that, she lived way up in the Northeast part of the United States. But still, we made sure that she came out. We were able to have her in our home on different occasions, and she's vacationed with us, and it's a relationship that I've never experienced. I never had anything like that with my grandparents ever, but it was just so amazing how she just felt so at home with my wife and I. And now that's gone by her own doing. And there was no signs whatsoever. You mentioned before, our before we started to record, about talking about the signs of suicide. Yes, there's signs out there, but oftentimes there are none. You have no clue. My granddaughter hung herself. My own daughter had to cut her own child down. And, the pain I feel is horrible. But the pain she feels, I could never imagine that kind of trauma. She was downstairs in the same house when her own daughter took her life. So I feel bad that my granddaughter didn't call me and talk to me when she was feeling bad. In the past, she'd always call and say, "Hey, Grandpa, I just needed to talk to somebody." And I've got several voice messages of her calling and I just needed to talk. But the time when she needed to talk the most, she didn't call.
Oh, now you talk about there are no signs. You didn't have you didn't see any signs at the time, but really for the audience of like Wally Omobola TV, now that you've journeyed through all this and you're more exposed, likewise, regarding the topic of suicide or the awareness about it, I would like you to let us know the warning signs for suicide that are easy to miss.
Well, some of the warning signs, some of what I've learned afterwards is you can't, let's use a parent and child relationship. If a child comes home and says, "How was school today?" Says, "I'm fine." Don't just take fine. Say, "Well, let's get into your day." Don't use those words, but, just sit down and talk to your child. "Well, what good happened with you today?" And on, things like that. Just have them have an actual conversation. Fine doesn't truly get down to their feeling, whether they're feeling great or whether they're feeling bad. And it's not always, a lot of times we think of suicide and we think, oh, that's just, the people with the worst mental health there is going to end that'll end their lives, bipolar, schizophrenic, or whatever the case may be. But it's really not. Most often, it's a person that you would never understand how they could come to this point. Because my family and I have no clue. Almost, 7 months later, I have no clue why she did this. She was always smiling, always happy. Every picture there's only one picture I have with her where she wasn't smiling. And that was when we went to the Polynesian Cultural Center on the island of Oahu, which was, it shows a lot of the Polynesian cultures from around the South Pacific. And they were showing dances from, I can't remember what island nation it was, but they got her up on stage and she just had this terrified look on her face. But later in the day, she volunteered to go up on stage and was all smiling. So, but it's, and my own daughter didn't even know what she was going through. It's a lot of times it's those kind of people. Like, let's say a kid who's straight A student, the star athlete on what football, basketball, whatever. But yet they haven't learned how to cope with failure because they've always been successful. They've been driven themselves to succeed. Their parents have driven them or encouraged them, or whatever way it was, to help them be successful in every aspect of their life. And then a failure comes. Let's say one of these students gets an F on a paper. They don't know how to cope with that failure. And in their mind, their world has just come to an end. They've never talked about what happens if I do fail. They've always talked about, you can do this. You're going to win. You're a winner. And now when they do wind up in a place of failing, they have no clue what to do. And rather facing their parents or other loved ones or the shame at school, they think their life is over. And so they just end it. And these are good kids.
So Collins, why would a person think of ending their life? What would have triggered such?
I'm sorry, I can't understand the question.
Why would a person think of committing suicide? Is there anything that can trigger it, or any situations?
It could be, yeah. It's a feeling of not feeling loved, just feeling totally lost in life. Of course, there are many serious mental health conditions, bipolar, serious deep depression, of course, if left untreated, schizophrenia, but all these have medications, and it's a matter of being willing to go on the medications and stay on the medications and take care of yourself. It's not easy. And some people, when they get on the medications, they think, well, two things happen. One thing will be they don't like some of the side effects the medications are causing them. They might feel, drowsy or just, and they think, I'm not going to do this anymore. And the other way is, I'm feeling great. I don't need medications anymore. But taking your medications can wind up in a life or death situation. My daughter did tell me that my granddaughter had been on medications for depression, but refused to take them. She found a stockpile of her, she went on saying she was taking her meds, but after her death, my daughter said that she found where she'd been keeping all the medications that she did not take. And my daughter says, well, that she couldn't micromanage her and, just stand there and make sure she'd take them. But if she did, my granddaughter might be alive today.
Why are you so sure of that, Collins? Why do you think that meds, can be the respite?
Why do I think what?
That medicines, drugs can be the respite.
The medicines, I can't understand that last part of your question. You still have that
Well, you
echo.
were talking, you said that if your granddaughter, if she had taken medications, probably she would be alive till today. And I'm asking you the question, why do you think so? Why do you think that taking medications, would have salvaged the situation on ground?
Well, medications don't cure everything, that's for sure. But antidepressants help with and I'm on antidepressants right now. And when I first started on them, I was just like, oh man, I don't want to do anything. And then after and it takes 6 to 8 weeks before medications actually start to do what they're intended to do. And now, even with the tragedy I've been through, if I wouldn't have been on medications when my granddaughter entered her life, I don't know how I would have handled it. But my mind is clearer. And I'm able to think things through better instead of just feeling the overwhelmingness of life. And that's what somebody who takes their life feels, is they're completely overwhelmed with life. That's the only thing I can figure out. And it's, sometimes, you hear sometimes that there are warning signs. Well, here's one example that might have been a warning sign with my granddaughter. She loved to swim. And she had been working at a swimming pool near her home. And for 2 or 3 years. And when my wife and I got into the town where they lived, we had some time before we met up with my granddaughter. She was busy preparing for the funeral. I wanted to see where my granddaughter worked at because I knew how much she loved swimming. So we went out to the pool, and it was closed at the time. And I was just standing at the fence, looking, imagining her being out there. And the manager of the pool walked up and asked if there's anything he could do for me. And I told him who I was, that I just wanted to see where my granddaughter worked. And he invited me in, took me into the snack stand where she was a lot of the time while she was there. And he said that she'd worked the morning before it was at nighttime when she ended her life. And she had worked at the pool that morning. And he said it was the best day that she'd ever had at work. And so you hear sometimes that people, when they all of a sudden, have all these problems going on, and then they think, okay, now I'm going to end it. I don't have to worry about anything anymore. I can just don't have to worry. All the worries are gone. That's what they feel.
That's a deep one, Collins. Thank you for sharing this insight with us and also your personal life story. And now the question is, what are some of the discussions that we need to start having now, especially on suicide awareness?
Some of the discussions, I think, there's before and after discussions. There's before to try to prevent, and then after if you've been through it, because you're never ready for something like this. Beforehand, like I started to say earlier, is well, first off, before I get a little bit deeper into it, well, blend it together, I guess. There's a lot of people who just feel that they don't have anyone to turn to. They might be isolated or feel that they're isolated anyway. They might live in a home to where it's not a healthy environment, where they're truly not learning how to love themselves or how to love others. That's how I grew up. I really didn't know love until my wife of 17 years and I had been married a little while, and I finally truly learned what love was all about. But first thing a person could do if they feel that there's no one there, now the hotline, the crisis hotline, has been made very easy to get a hold of someone. Either text or call 988. And there's people on standby 24/7 in the United States. 988. It's that simple. All you have to do is call 988 if you need somebody to talk to. There are people standing by who will be there for you. If somebody needs more than that, if they feel you can't get love at home, or understanding or somebody to talk to, especially youth. Don't go down and hang out with your friends who don't understand what you're going through or can't give you true guidance and true love. They'll just like, yeah, man, life really stinks, doesn't it? Yeah, my parent, all they're going to do is bring negativity into it. And go to a church, go to a synagogue, go to a mosque, find a leader, or go to a youth facility, anything to where you can find somebody with a level head who can be there for you and guide you and give you the love and the support that you do need. If you have problems at home, talk to somebody like that. And medications, they're not 100% foolproof. You still need counseling and therapy. And don't be afraid to admit it, for crying out loud. It's better than not living.
Absolutely. Thank you once again, Collins Hughes, for your incredible insight. Talking about suicide awareness, it's really been a good pleasure having you on the show once again. So, Collins, do you have any exciting news you'd like to share with my audience? Perhaps you have a project you'd like to share.
Well, I've started a podcast. It's not very big yet. And it's inspired by the loss of my granddaughter. It's called The Miracles of Tragedy. And I state it that way because I've had several tragic moments in my life. And each time I've had a tragedy, there's been a miracle. In the death of my oldest daughter, she and I had been estranged because we just didn't see eye to eye a lot. And I hadn't talked to her for some time. She hadn't wanted to talk for some time. When she was diagnosed with cancer, she reached out to me. The last few years of her life, we got to be close, which also got me close to my oldest granddaughter, who is now in college and doing wonderful, who calls me every couple of weeks. We text a lot. And so that miracle brought my oldest granddaughter into my life. And the death of my granddaughter. Her mother has sisters. When their mother and I were married, I was not a good person then. I, had affairs, I turned into, drinking, womanizing individual, just like my father was. And of course, that ended our marriage. When she remarried, she married a gentleman who was retired military in the United States, which came with insurance benefits and other benefits, for dependents. And they asked if he could adopt them in order for the girls to have all these benefits. And I thought, well, that's more than I can afford to pay in child support, sure. But once I signed those papers, what I didn't understand at the time was that I had just signed away all rights to my daughters. And they grew up feeling abandoned by me, understandably so. But at that funeral setting, the funeral home had people, send in digital pictures with my granddaughter, memories of her. And they were swarmed with 400 or 500 pictures. And the funeral home picked out pictures at random to put in a video that was played during her viewing and before the funeral started. Over half of those pictures was my granddaughter with my wife and I in Hawaii, in our home, all these smiles. Over half of them was. Now, all of a sudden, from my other daughters, here's all these grandchildren. They know who I am all of a sudden. At the after the funeral, I'm standing next. I'm standing next to the coffin, and the oldest daughter from my my youngest daughter walks up to me and says, "Do you need a hug?" I said, "Yeah, I do." At the burial the next day, her oldest son came up to me afterwards and says, "May I hug you?" I said, "Yeah." And then my oldest daughter in the sibling group texted me that morning before we left for the burial, saying that her 16-year-old daughter wanted to be a part of my life. Made me promise that this is a lifelong thing. And I said, "Absolutely, I understand." So after the interment was over, that service was over, the graveside service, and my daughter brought her daughter up to me, and she knew, what had happened years ago. She looks at me and says, "Are you a good man now?" And it felt so good to look in this child's eyes and say, "Yes, I am." And now this child and I just text all the time, and and so that was a miracle that came out of tragedy. And there are miracles in life. There are clouds in the silver lining in the clouds of tragic moments. They're there. They're not always as obvious as mine, but they're there. Sometimes you just have to look for them. Life is worth living.
That's right. Thank you once again, Collins, for that motivation and inspiration. What a topic of discussion we have today. Collins, any impactful word or any parting word you'd like to share with my audience?
If you ever go through such a tragedy like this, it's going to, at first it's going to punch you in the face and knock you down like you could never imagine. I didn't even think that I could get on the plane to go to the funeral. It's like the earth itself is holding you down. And as time goes on, you start to get more motivation and more drive to get through things. The first time you laugh afterwards, you go, "Oh, I shouldn't be laughing." Or the first time you smile, it says, "I shouldn't be smiling." You're going to feel that guilt. And you're going to feel anger. My daughter and her husband have just bought a new house because she has to walk through that room every day to go to her office where her daughter ended her life. And so now they're making that to get out of that environment into a new home and a new chapter of their lives. But so she feels that anger when she walks through that room. Anger's going to come because this is done by their own hand. They killed themselves. They killed themselves. And that's a tough pill to swallow.
Collins, do you have any social media handles you'd like to share with my audience? Perhaps your website, so we can get to learn more about what societies and society awareness and what you're doing in your immediate community.
Now, I've got 2 websites that I created after my granddaughter's passing. And they're mirrors of each other. So if you type in one, you're going to get the same site as the other. It's stopsuicide.life and stopteensuicide.life. Part of it is a tribute to my granddaughter. And I wrote kind of an essay on there about, I call them, about trying to make, you have to read it.
We sure do.
And then there's one page has different organizations that people can contact, and the 988 information is on there as well. And then another one is a video I took myself within a half hour after learning of my granddaughter's death, that I came into my sound booth, and it was the most raw, painful emotion that you could ever see. My wife won't even watch it because she's heard it, this part of it. She won't even watch it. It's so raw of me and what I was feeling at that moment.
It's been a great pleasure having Colin Hughes on the show today. Colin is a speaker once again, and he addresses suicide issues and focusing on suicide awareness. He's on the show to share more about his personal life stories and all what suicide is about. It's truly be an inspiring and expository topic for discussion today. I can only wish you the best of luck.
Thank you,
Collins, in all your projects, right?
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on your show.
All right, it's a pleasure once again. Now, if you'd like to catch up with any of these episodes of Live Well with Omobola Stephen, you can do so on any cross-promotion platforms or any distribution platforms we bump into online, and do have an amazing time. Perhaps you are telling to yourself, Omobola, I have a story to tell, perhaps an expertise or an insights to share, which is disruptive in nature to the audience of Live Well with Omobola Stephen. You can do so by sending a mail to me, omobolastephen@outlook.com. I will be looking forward to your mail. I need to let you know that we can have a great show together and be the change that the world is waiting for. Come on. I talk to you soon. Bye for now. Bye.